Creating visual stuff in HTML and JavaScript is always fun. So this lesson is going to be a lot of fun because this is where we generate the card, and instead of having 6 diamonds or 6 diamond, we're going to have more of a visual representation. Going into our code, we already have a function ready to make a card. We want to pass in a value into the make a card. So this can be a value of the card. So let's say card. And where we have make deck draw card, we've got our make card here, and we've got our my card value that we can pass in to make it. So essentially we're selecting, and we've got all of that object information. So we've got a suit, a rank, and a value. And of course, if you had more object information contained within that card, that could be passed through as well. So if you want to extend on it and make it even more complex and interesting, you could add additional values and parameters into that deck. So for now, we'll just console log out the card. Just make sure that we are getting everything properly. We should hit start. We can see that we've got the clubs. The 10 of clubs has been selected. So let's draw that out and visually represent that. First of all, creating some HTML containers. We've got our card object that we can utilize. We've got a rank within that card. And now it's a little bit of HTML to draw that out. And the reason that I used the different values here within the suits is that these are also can be represented in HTML characters and ASC2 characters. So if I take and hearts, I can output that value as a suit, and I'll show you how that works. So we've got our rank, which is going to be a 10, and then underneath I'm going to add in that visual representation of the heart. So taking the card suit value, so we see that as clubs in this case. And this is where that and is important, because placing that in front is going to represent that visually. And then the semicolon to close that off. So that's going to be the card that we're building out. Let's create a div in order to house that information. So document, using create element in JavaScript allows us to create elements on the fly dynamically. And the element we want to create is a div. I'll move this up so it's more centered. So creating a div next. We'll take gameplay, so that gameplay object that we set up earlier, and append child to that. And the child that we're going to appending is a div. And then within this div that we've just freshly created, let's set some inner HTML into it. So taking the div, updating our inner HTML, and for now we'll set it up as HTML1 value. And let's try that out. So now when we hit start, we see this jack of diamonds, and we can actually get rid of that output here where we're setting our gameplay inner HTML, and we can blank that out. So hit start, we've got our queen of spades. So it looks a little bit better, and of course we can use some styling to really update this. So let's open up our CSS, and we'll update the styling of these elements. And if you're not interested in the styling, you can skip through the rest of this lesson, as it's just going to be working through some default styling so that we can output the visuals of the card in a better, more appropriate fashion. So I'm using absolute, position absolute, and then I'm going to be attaching in these classes into that particular element that we built, and we'll be doing that in the upcoming lesson. So for now, I'm just setting up some default styling, so display inline block, that we're going to be using in the next lesson in order to build out the look and feel of our card. So adding in some padding of 7 pixels, height. So this is the height of our card. We also need to set a width for the card. And these could also change as well, depending on what to suit your needs. This is the background color. I'm going to make it white, but not exactly white, so white smoke. Border, so a 1-pick solid black border. I usually like to round the sides of the cards, so we can use border radius for that. I'll set up 5 pixels of border radius, and also a box shadow. So that has a nice, more 3D effect, adding in that 3D effect for the cards. And the way that I want to do the card is more of a typical card where we're going to output the Queen of Hearts or Queen of Spades twice, and we're going to have a big one in the center and then a small one up in the top right corner, so a tiny one. So let's set up our big class, and this will output for the center. We need to have a font size, fairly large font size. I'm going to use 3EM. Using text align, we can go ahead and center text align. Setting the line height, so we can always force a specific height for the line height so we don't get out of shape for our content, inner content. Margin auto, and I'll do a display block. Also, some of the cards are red, some of them are going to be black, so we're going to apply a red class to the red ones, and we can set that color to red. So that's going to set the text display color to red. And then lastly, we've got one more class that we need to build out before we conclude this lesson, and that's going to be our tiny element using display block. So this one's small, so 0.8 EM. Also, make sure you set that line height so that we get the positioning, and vertical align. So we're going to vertically align this to the top. So we refresh it, and we haven't added in these classes yet. We're going to do that in the upcoming lesson, so we'll have a more visual representation for that particular card. So that's still coming up in the next lesson. So go ahead and add this into your project, and you're going to be ready for the next lesson where we continue as we build out these elements. We're going to apply some classes, and we're going to style it to look more like a card. So that's still to come.